This podcast is brought to you by Tri-Velo Coaching, where we help triathletes and cyclists like you train smarter to race faster. I'm your host, Gerard Donnelly, and on my left is former Australian Ironman Champion and head coach of Tri-Velo Coaching, Gerard Donnelly. Every athlete deals with race day nerves, and every athlete turns up to race day not just turning up against the race, but facing a battle against your mindset. Are you going to come out of it, on top of it, or not? And most people assume that when you've done the work and the training, you can turn up on race day and the result will take care of itself. But this could not be more wrong. If you don't execute properly, if you put your efforts down at the wrong times, you will undo all the hard work you've done and ruin your race. So today we're asking, how do you get yourself in the right mindset to perform at your best? How do you put yourself in the right state to perform well? And how do you get the most out of all the hard work you've done? That and more in today's episode. As always, this episode is brought to you by our partners at Giant. The Giant family just loves bike riding, training, and racing. Ride life, ride Giant. Dad, welcome back to another episode. Starting with our normal first segment, what are you grateful for?
Thanks, George. Looking forward to this one. My gratitude is very simple. I've had this period of consistency since the last 6 months when I've been able to ride, when I had a period where I had such an inconsistent training and racing period in my life, I suppose, where injury or my back operation has prevented me from doing that. And that's probably the longest period I've had, where it's been, 15 or 16 weeks of nothing. And we've had lots of good podcasts showing how you can overcome this eventually if you think about it in long term rather than the short term. Now I look back, it's a year gone by now, which was in May, the start of May, and that 16-week period seems insignificant because I've had 40 weeks or 35 weeks, my maths is not too good here, 35 weeks of really good training since that point. And you forget about that 16 weeks. We don't forget about it, but you certainly understand that if you, in the scheme of things over a year or two or three, that will become less significant in your life. And so my gratitude is all about having periods of consistency, and we're going to have these roadblocks along the way. And it's just making sure, almost the topic we're going to talk about today, the mindset that you have is, I've just got to work my way through the injury or the sickness or whatever's causing me to be inconsistent. And then once I get the green light, I can then focus on just turning up every day. And that's what consistency is. It's not about being a hero on one particular session each week and doing that really well and then actually missing a few days here and there. The hardest part of a training program is turning up each day. And, if the program says you have to do a hard session and you're very motivated, but you feel fatigue, just turn up and do something that's a little bit less intense. But make sure you turn up. And the only reason you wouldn't is because you're actually sick or there's some injury. But other than that, you should be thinking about, I've just got to make sure that I do this week so that I'm 7 sessions ahead for next week. And then if I look back over 3 weeks, I've done every session and now I've got 21 under my belt if I do 1 session a day. Instead of I've half done it, I've got 12 sessions and I'm 50% better than I would have been had I just gone to that inconsistency habit. And I think that's the key gratitude that I have is my mindset is allowing me to turn up each day. And whether it's a great session or whether it's a very basic session, I know that I'm ticking sessions on and I am progressively getting better and fitter, closer to where I want to be.
There is such beauty in consistency, and often you want to do the shiny session and you want to do the hero session, and we all fall victim to that. I want to smash out a session and do something that was going to make me feel really impressive almost, but there's actually, more glory and more benefit in turning up each day and doing that consistently and being in that positive habit, because when it's taken away from you, it's as you've spoken about, it's horrible. But also when you start being inconsistent, when things get in the way, if you get injured for some reason, life gets in the way, and you stop training, you start to get into this kind of negative feedback loop where training becomes harder, and then the momentum starts to slow down, and then you feel less motivated, and therefore training becomes even harder, and it just kind of goes in a bit of a downward spiral. And we see this undo a lot of athletes. And so, the magic formula to that is to get back to consistency. And when you do, you just when you are training consistent, it feels so good, but then you can almost become numb to the feeling. And then when it's taken away from you, you go, oh, I miss that feeling of when I was just super consistent for 12 weeks in a row or 16 weeks in a row. And that's all it is. It's normally just 6 or 12 or 16 weeks of just a great period. And you are as fit as you've ever been, and you're absolutely peaking. So that's a good reminder for everyone to, that's all it takes for you to be feeling back on top of the world.
Just to ask anybody, Jord, who is currently injured or is sick, how they didn't realise how much they actually enjoyed the training process, and they can't wait to get back to it, and they're not allowed to because they've got an injury that might be another 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and then they get perspective instantly of, far out, when I start again, my goal is just to be consistent as much as I can, and I will just start to gradually improve my fitness level, and my performance will be a reflection of the consistency anyway, as we all know.
For sure. My gratitude is kind of along a similar sort of theme, but it's talking about the running boom that we've mentioned a fair bit over the last 6 to 12 months. And I'm just actually really grateful for the increase in popularity of running, because over the last 6 months, I have done more run clubs and more social runs with friends and people I never expected than ever before. And for us, where we spend a lot of time training solo and doing our own training, that has been a really enjoyable process. And you obviously can't do every session like that because it does take away from your training a little bit, but I have just ran with friends and met a whole bunch of new people that I never would have, all because of this running boom, and people that have really taken up running and absolutely loved it the last 6 to 12 months. So I've really been loving that process, and that has meant that running coverage, race coverage, athletics news and media is just growing and growing, which I'm super stoked with, because we absolutely love it, which kind of brings us to the next point of what we've been noticing. What's caught our attention is that it's 2 months to the Olympics, and all the athletes, especially in athletics, are starting to come out, and they've finished a big training block. A lot of them have finished altitude training camps, and they're starting to race, and they're starting to get themselves in form and show the results of the training they've been doing. And we've just been seeing some pretty epic racing, which always happens around the Olympic period. This last final months, you just see some epic Diamond League races. You're seeing athletes basically coming into their prime of their 4 years, and it's truly incredible to watch. And over the weekend, we had the Prefontaine Classic Diamond League race. There were some pretty unbelievable showdowns, and then the one, if you haven't been following athletics and you've been hiding under a rock, the Kerr versus Ingebrigtsen rivalry, which has been brewing for years, came to its climax, or first climax, I should say, over the weekend, where they have finally had their showdown, and after a lot of talk, and Ingebrigtsen has been semi unbeatable the last few years, apart from losing twice to a British athlete in the World Champs. He had his first race back from injury against a very informed Kerr, and Kerr took the win, and it was it's pretty interesting to watch, and it's the lesson for us here is, I think you want to talk about this, is this is the first race for Ingebrigtsen. Kerr's been in pretty good form for a few months. How does this play out to the Olympics?
Yeah, and look, we're kind of almost dismissing the rest of the field.
Yes, yeah.
And you've got Wakeman, who beat Ingebrigtsen at the World Champs on that exact same track, actually, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You've got the American, just his name's...
Yeah, Nagoose. Yeah.
Nagoose.
Ironic that you forgot his name when we were talking about forgotten athletes.
That's right. So, and Ollie Hoare, and there's probably 5 runners on any given day on that particular Prefontaine Classic. Some of the best, fastest runs ever recorded were in that race, just gone by, and most of the guys are doing personal bests or seasons bests, or close to that. So, as you said, it's great to see everybody coming into form, and understanding if we talk about Kerr and Ingebrigtsen and not the other guys, but everybody else is trying to get to that final in Paris with a chance to, and anything can happen on our championship day, as we know, and that's kind of the theme that Kerr has been pushing onto Ingebrigtsen, this mindset that you can only win when there's a pacemaker, and I can, and he proved it at the Prefontaine. He didn't sit on Ingebrigtsen. He went round him and took charge of the race, which I thought was fantastic. That's someone taking control of the event, and showing that he can win either way. And I think you made the comment that Ingebrigtsen said, well, I've only lost 3 times in 20 races, and 17 of them I've been run the way that I want to run it, and I've only lost 3 times. So which percentage would you rather have? And I think that was a great answer, but you can spin anything any way you like. But what's going to happen now? This is 8 weeks out. A lot can happen between now and July in Paris, and I can't wait to see. I want us to go back to this episode after the final of 1,500 metre has been run, and just look at what people did and where their form went. Is Kerr peaking right now, or has he got more to give? Remember, that was a 2-second PB that he ran. Is that right? And Ingebrigtsen ran slower than his PB. So that's an interesting
almost
statistic.
2 seconds as well, yeah.
That's right. And Ingebrigtsen's been injured. So most people understand that. But, Ingebrigtsen's got more to give. Kerr is already at his peak. And can Kerr go faster? That's the question I'll be asking. Can he get better than that at the moment? Because he'll need to be. If form is true to anything, Ingebrigtsen will be running at his peak unless he gets injured again. But he will be on race day, and he's proven it many times that he can perform on the big stages, and so can Kerr, and so can Jake Whiteman. And Nagoose is someone who shouldn't be underestimated, and Ollie Hoare, and there's so many other runners who are going to be doing exactly the same thing. So it's super exciting.
It really is, and Nagoose cannot be forgotten in this conversation because he's ran the second fastest mile time in the last 20 years. Basically, his PB is 0.2 of a second behind Ingebrigtsen at 3:43.8 or something, and so he was also 2 seconds off his PB, and he was really happy with his race. In the post interview, he was smiling, just saying, "Absolutely stoked, exactly where I want to be right now." And he is not forgotten in the conversation, but it was all about Kerr versus Ingebrigtsen. And look, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but there is some real great learnings in this race, and it deserves all the hype, and the rivalry deserves the hype, because there are a lot of learnings that, and especially with the topic today being race day mindset, and you and I had a conversation almost for 40 minutes about this, but Kerr said something really interesting in the post-race conference where he took over the lead with 600 to go, and he got asked, why did he do that? That's quite a long way out to lead, when last time he beat Ingebrigtsen by kicking with 200 to go. And he said that his coaches told him absolutely do not do that. They wanted to take the race win, and they thought his best chance of doing that was to wait till 200 to go and kick it. And he said because they told him that, he's a bit of a spiteful athlete, he said, and he said, I'm going to do the opposite. And his reasoning behind it was really appropriate, I thought. He said, we're 2 months out from the Olympics. Ultimately, this race doesn't matter, even though there's a lot of hype around these two and there's a lot of ego on the line. He wanted to try something different to prove and see how strong he could be. And if he blew up, he was willing to accept that result. So, he went against coach's orders, which we personally wouldn't like to do. Or I know you wouldn't like that to happen, but it paid off for him. So what were your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think on the topic we're going to talk about, the mindset, and you mentioned Nagoose and you mentioned Kerr's thoughts, and we also talked about Ingebrigtsen. None of them were unhappy. They all had the mindset of, no, this is not my big race. This is a race that I'm going to be seeing where my form is, and not shying away from the race. A lot of history says people stay away from competing against each other until the final big race, and they don't want to be letting their confidence drop by losing. Well, these new athletes that are the new age athletes right now, they're not afraid of racing. And I think as an age group athlete, we should have the same mindset. You're trying to measure yourself against yourself, whereas these guys are trying to measure themselves against others, and the whole world's watching. As an age group athlete, no one's watching me. I've got my little group of family who are really keen for me to do well, in my own performance. And that's how, as athletes, age group athletes, we should be thinking. We shouldn't be putting all of this stress and pressure on ourselves about performance. It's all about you actually not being afraid of the position you put yourself in, because at the end of the day, you've chosen to do this triathlon or this marathon or this bike time trial or whatever the event you're choosing. That's what you want to do. So, have the mindset of whatever happens on the day, as long as I perform the best I can, I'm going to be happy. And that's the thing I saw with the interviews post-race was Kerr was happy, Nagoose was happy, Ingebrigtsen was happy, Ollie Hoare was happy. There was no unhappy runners because it was all, they had this thought process that, this is just another training session, even though it's a big race. That it's a huge race. Prefontaine Classic is a huge race, but they're using it as their preparation and learning. And Kerr's gone and done some tactic different, but you watch come Olympics, he'll draw on this race knowing, well, exactly. I've done this tactic before. Yeah. This worked.
Yeah.
But Ingebrigtsen might be a different athlete, and he might do that tactic, and then Ingebrigtsen comes back around him, because watching that race, Ingebrigtsen was so close to the back of his heels that he didn't have the kick. And I think that's a lack of training. But they're examples of of what you should be thinking about as an age group athlete. That every opportunity you get, whether it's a training session or whether it's a B race or C race, that you're just testing yourself and understanding how you perform and what worked for you. And these guys are getting a lot of information back after that race, what their opposition's like and what the level they need to be at to improve. But also knowing where they sit right now in their, Ingebrigtsen can say, well, I ran strong, I'm really happy with that, but I know that it's 2 seconds off my best. So I've still got a bit of work to go. So that's what he would come away with. Kerr would say, that's the fastest I've ever run. And I took on challenges, and he would get a huge, everybody's getting confidence boost from it if you're looking for the right things. And I think as age groupers, we try to put ourselves, these are elite athletes with the world spotlight on them, yet they're happy to go and pin themselves against others and be okay with the consequences. Does it make Ingebrigtsen a bad person that he's lost 3 out of 20? No, he doesn't think like that, and that's how, as age groupers, we should be thinking. We're going to have some races that don't go to plan, but learn from them and make sure next time that you fix those things that caused you to have a poor result. And that's kind of what we're trying to get the message across here.
I'm really glad you made that point, and I think we really want to emphasize that, because rightly so, we get a lot of athletes really nervous about races, really nervous about testing and field testing. And as you would know, if you followed us for a while, we do a lot of regular FTP tests, regular 5 or 10K time trials, regular half marathon practice, race ready sessions, etc. Time trials in the pool. And athletes have a lot of fear around this, and we have many reasons why we do it so regularly. And one of them is to help you address those race day nerves and fears and anxieties head on, and get used to, it's almost like trial by combat, like get thrown in the deep end, but you really have to, by repetition and just doing it over and over, you learn to not put so much pressure on yourself. But as you just mentioned, these athletes are willing to put themselves on the world stage with spotlight on them under all that pressure, and just be happy with their process. And it was a really good example from a lot of the athletes to see that even under all that pressure, it would be easy for them to not treat it as a C race or a B race. It would be easy for them to want to put all their eggs in one basket and take the win there. And there was real maturity from Ingebrigtsen, I thought, to run the way he did and to be happy with that result. And look at this. We could go back and forth on this, for the rest of the episode, because ultimately his time was the 11th fastest time, I think, of all time in the mile, which is just insane. And it's his season opener after coming back from a pretty extensive injury. But then Kerr could argue that you can only beat who you're racing against, and there's massive merit to that. And they're not turning up not to win. Ingebrigtsen wanted to win that race, no doubt, and Kerr beat him. And so, like you said, he can draw on that. So there's a lot in this, but I think one of the biggest lessons that we really want to reiterate is that if the world's best athletes can treat these races as another training session, it's something really we can really take on board and not put so much pressure on all our B and C races, because we do see that a lot, and it's it makes training and racing hard if you're going to put yourself under that pressure every single time, and it's actually not going to be as enjoyable.
Yep, it's got to be fun, and the fun factor is you getting the right mindset around why you're doing it. And once you understand why you're doing it, and as we've said many times, even now, that's one example of getting the right mindset. But there's a whole list of other examples which we mentioned time and time again about, practicing execution and understanding where your form currently is, and making sure that you don't go out too hard, and then getting the right training numbers from that event for the next training block. They're just examples of why we would do it. But the main thing is to get you used to that feeling of having to measure your effort for whether it's a training session or whether it's your A race. You just got to keep practicing that, because you want it to become automatic. come race day. And that's the key to doing. If you shy away from that and never test yourself, come race day, that's the only time you're ever doing it. So you haven't got any experience at it. If you've done 50 of these trials in 25 weeks, it becomes okay in your mind that, it's just I've just got to measure my execution here. That's all I've got to concentrate on.
Yeah. Look, and there's more nuances to this, and we're going to keep talking about them as we move through the rest of the topic. But some last things on the ath front that we want to mention. Jess Hull broke the Australian record running a blistering 3:55, and I'm not shocked anymore, but I'm just so in awe of how good the middle distance racing is at the moment in the world, and how good our Aussie girls are. And no girls had broken 4 minutes 4 years ago, and Lyndon Hall and Jess Hull were the first ones to break it, which was a massive barrier. They ran 3:59, and then in this process of 3 or 4 years, they both made an Olympic final, and she just ran 3:55. Girls were not running 3:55 3 or 4 years ago. It's just super impressive, and it's just so awesome to see, and it was incredible racing, and she's someone that just seems to come into more and more form as she races. I think this is her 3rd or 4th race back, so I can't wait for her build to the Olympics, and hopefully she has learned a lot over the last years in the last Olympics where she got to the final and can work on that to peak in great form. And that's kind of, we want to keep watching that and see what happens over the next 8 to 9 weeks. What races do they opt to do, and how fast can she go, because that is just unbelievable running.
And also, Jordy, the depth of the female athletes around the world. There's just not 1 or 2 doing it now. There's, up to 15 people who are actually doing that. And because the standard's improving, guess what? Everybody else is being dragged along. And that's what's good about it, because, we use this, in our own coaching business. We run some events to push people where there's competition, if there's no competition around. And, whether it's you competing against yourself or with others, having targets to aim for is actually a good thing. Not all the time, but to make sure that you are measuring yourself, and this is what's happening with the male and female athletes is, if someone's standard goes to another level, the rest of the field has to either put up the white flag or do something about it. And we're seeing that amongst the Australian girls are all great friends, which is even more exciting. And they're all pushing each other to be better athletes because, Jess has done this and someone else has done this and I have to get to that level if I want to be competitive. And so it's just helping each other.
Yeah, it's all around. I mean, this is why I said at the start I love an Olympic here, because again, in that men's mile there was I think 10 athletes under 350, which is just absolutely blistering. There was a Diamond League race a couple of years ago, which was incredible to watch. I think 3 people got under 350. So all round the athletes are just performing phenomenally, and so it's going to be really exciting next couple of months. And it would be remiss of us as not to mention our next love, which is cycling, and the Giro finished up with relatively straightforward win for the Pog, but as always in a Grand Tour there's a lot of stories inside it, and I think one of the main ones for us watching, and we are always looking to see what can we learn from these races, what can we learn from what's happening. Lots to talk about, but one of the standouts for us was Geraint Thomas at 38 years old coming on the podium again, holding on to 3rd after coming 2nd last year. If you eliminated Pog's win of 9 minutes, Geraint Thomas was 20 seconds off winning, and there's been a lot of talk about his age, and I just love that he kind of said at the end of the tour, he said, God, there's been a lot of people bringing up my age, but he doesn't see why it should be an issue as long as his fitness and form is there, and he's still riding the power that he can, and he is, and so he's going to keep going for as long as that power and that form is there, which I just absolutely loved.
Yeah, and he obviously loves racing and loves his job as a professional athlete, and he's going to keep doing it as long as he's competitive. And unreal, he is competitive. I mean, he's racing against low 20-year-olds, and as he said, what does it matter what your age is? As long as you've still got a form that's competitive, then you should be putting yourself in there if you love what you're doing. And I'm a big advocate of age is just a number, and I've pushed that my whole life. I don't care what people's ages are, as long as they're loving what they're doing and staying competitive. And it's not it doesn't even have to be when you're 50 or 60 being competitive. It's just being fit and healthy yourself to actually do PBs yourself, and not comparing yourself against other people around you. That's kind of important as well, as you're competitive with yourself and you're determined to make sure that your levels don't deteriorate too quickly, because It has to as we get older. You can't, as a 70-year-old, be the same athlete as you were as a 60 or a 50 or a 40-year-old. That's just obvious. But there are lots of people who can defy those odds and still be, relatively close to what they were as a, well, if I look at myself as a 65-year-old, what are my numbers when I was 50? That's 15 years ago. That's like, comparing a 75-year-old to a 60-year-old. Well, I think it's quite different when you compare those age groups, because the drop-off seems to be quicker once you hit that 70. So, they're examples of how you should be thinking about your form and your fitness. And the reason we talk about Geraint Thomas is because we firmly believe if you just keep being consistent, you can actually maintain a good level of health and fitness as long as you do the work. And that's the key thing. You still have to do the work. You can't just talk about it. But yeah, I digress a bit there. But one of the key things I really loved was Alaphilippe. His return to form and his aggressiveness, and every day it looked like he was loving, well, what can I do today? What can I do in this stage today? And I think he was the most aggressive rider for the Tour. I think he gave that most combative title. I think he won that. Mm-hmm. And, he ended up winning one stage, but he was almost in 2 or 3 other stages where he could have won as well. Just didn't quite have the fitness, but his form is coming back, and his aggressive riding, which is what we loved about him. And when we used to watch Peter Sagan, who's the same type of rider, very aggressive on, doesn't matter what the actual course of the day's stage was, he was in it. He was in the break and having a go, and even in the break, attacking the break. And it's just great to watch. And it's just a reminder to all the age groupers out there that you will have periods of good times, and you'll have periods of not so good, whatever the reason. It doesn't matter the reason, whether you're sick or injured or just having a rough time. If you stick with the process, things will turn around if you hang in there long enough. And I can remember so many people saying, "Oh, Alaphilippe, he's done. There's no way he's not gonna be the Alaphilippe of old." Well, this Giro, he's just told all those people, "You don't write me off." And look at the way he rode; it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, it's again, I love this conversation because I really just think it's bringing up some really good themes. And the age thing is really interesting, and the return to form thing, people writing him off and saying he's done. Just feel like you can never say that with certain athletes. And it's really, you've done this yourself when you talk about age, where you've kept readjusting your goals based on where you're at, and you had a really solid couple of decades, really wanting to master cycling because you were really injured running, and you just adjusted once you weren't able to run as well, or run at all. You adjusted your goals, and then had a lot of fun, mastering cycling basically. And then in the last few years, it's been a return to the triathlon racing scene more, and now you're aiming for the world champs aquabikes this year, and just adjusted the goals based on what's going to motivate you. And I think that's a really good learning for everyone. I was just thinking about age, and I've got a lot of friends around me. We're in our 30s now, and a lot of friends make small comments about like, oh, the body's slowing down, and recovering as well, and that kind of thing. And I'm 30? Sure, yeah, exactly.
That's a horrible sentence to hear.
Oh yeah, I know, and I do say that to friends around me, going, me personally, I'm still getting fitter, but you take inspiration from guys like Geraint Thomas or Alaphilippe, where people try and write them off because of their age, and they're still top 3 rider in the world at 38. I just think, there's a really important lesson there for everyone to remember. And I just wanted to reiterate that basically.
Yeah, and look, the rest of that tour, Pog was just incredible. He just dominated that tour, and you just can't dismiss that he is at the moment, by a mile, just so far ahead of, elite athletes, elite cyclists of the world. And to be fair, there wasn't anybody in the top 30 rankings in that race. So Remco wasn't there, Vingegaard wasn't there, and Roglic wasn't there. So I can't wait to see what happens at the Tour if those guys are all fit and healthy, and the 4 of them are against each other. And Jai Hindley's there, and there's other riders who are wanting to put their hands up as well. So it'll be good to see what happens when there's more competition. And I'm not saying I'm diminishing the competition that was in the Giro, but there weren't any top 30 ranked riders other than Pogačar in that race. So let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens to Pog's form between now and the Tour, which is 5 weeks away, and it's early this year because of the Olympics. So the dates have changed. So riding a Grand Tour and then fronting up for another Grand Tour with limited recovery time and against better riders, what's going to happen there? I can't wait to see what he does between now and then in terms of training. And then I want to talk about this, like we talked about Ingebrigtsen and Kerr. Looking back to did Pog ride well in the Giro to conserve for the Tour, or did he ride? We don't know whether he was at his max, and in a lot of the stages, we've got no idea whether he was doing it comfortably or he was doing it hard. So these are the questions that from an age grouper we're trying to learn about. You can't do everything. You got to pick A races and B races, and as a world leading rider, he's doing the hardest thing, which is doing 2 of the big Grand Tours back to back. And as age groupers, we wouldn't want people to do 2 Ironmans that close, because we don't have the same facilities that an elite cyclist has with recovery and the right science behind getting them to rest during the day. All of the age groupers we have all have jobs and all have families, and there is no recovery. It's you using sleep as your recovery, whereas the elite athletes have masseurs, exercise physiologists, just helping them with all of those specific stuff. So it's really going to be interesting to see how the next sort of 6 weeks pans out, and who comes up strong and who's left wanting. And I can't wait to see this period. It's just such an exciting period this year, with the Olympics and the Tour at the same time.
Yeah, it was shaping up to be one of the greatest Tour de France's of all time. And I think, just to rectify, it was top 20 GC riders, I think, not top 30, because I think Geraint Thomas was the 20th and there was a bunch more below him.
Okay.
And also, Bennett Common is ranked 6th or something, or 7th, although he had quite a disappointing Giro. But yeah, hopefully any one of the big 4, Roglic, Remco, or Vingegaard, can turn up to the Tour de France fit and healthy. Otherwise, Pog is just going to clean it up. But that seems unlikely that after their crashes, any of them will get back in really great form. But here's to hoping, because if Poggy was going to have his best chance ever of winning both, it is this year, and you wouldn't want to put an asterisk next to it. You can only turn up to who you race against. But with all of them fit and healthy, it would have been a monumental task for him to win both. But we'll see how it plays out. And that, we've been talking about kind of the mindset around racing this whole time. We really want to dive into the mindset for age groupers and how you go about your mindset for your own race, and really making sure that you are in the right frame of mind to perform at your best. I think that's the key here, and not letting the aura of race day or the race day nerves get the better of you. And so I kind of actually want to start with your success in your own career. You've had a very successful career in terms of winning, and that's not important for the age grouper, but it is important because it shows a sustained and consistent mindset, I think, from yourself, because it actually was result based. You were an athlete who was aiming for results and not just not necessarily improvements or PBs. And so that comes with a different kind of frame of mind as a professional athlete. So I want to kind of ask you to start with, what were you thinking about, or what kind of things do you think about to get yourself in the right mindset on race day? If you think about those big races where the result mattered, whether it was winning the Australian Ironman title, or even in your age group career where you turned up and you really had goals of winning Australian road racing titles, and the place mattered and not necessarily the performance.
Yeah, I think it's from the outset you've hit the nail on the head. It can be results based, and that can be a problem, I think, for a lot of athletes, and that can cause more anxiety if you just base everything that you're doing based on that finishing result. And I did that, and that certainly put pressure on myself. No one else put that pressure on. I did that to myself. But I did that intentionally because that's what got me out of bed each day to train properly. And if I got to any of those big races that I wanted to win desperately and I didn't, then I would be satisfied that I'd done everything that I could to get that right. And invariably, if I didn't get the result, it would be because I'd not ticked all the boxes along that journey. And there's a lot of boxes you have to tick, such as sleep, recovery, training, strength and conditioning, nutrition. Then on race dates, in a cycling race, it's tactics. How good are your tactics? That plays a big role in it. And then making right decisions in that race. And I'm talking road racing or criterium racing. Time trialing's also making decisions about what to do on certain parts of the course, but you're not responding to other people's aggression or lack of aggression. You're trying to create an opportunity for you to perform the best you can, and when to attack people when you think they're on their knees, or is this a good time to attack? So there's a lot that goes into getting that end result. So it's kind of a ridiculous way to measure your effort based on, did you get the result you wanted, and did you get the title that you're after? So the only way that I could get my mindset to think along those lines was, if I did the preparation and I was confident in everything I'd done before the race, I would have less anxiety about the outcome. And if on the day something happened, someone was better than me, I was absolutely okay with that. And in fact, that was almost more motivation to, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen next time. What do I need to do to fix that so that I get a better result? But I would be not down on myself unless I didn't do something in the preparation well. Then I'd be really angry with myself, not for the result, but that I didn't do the work required. And so I based a lot of my mindset going into races and not getting up anxious about them was, if I'd done the work, I was super confident that I should be able to execute. And that to me was the key to a lot of the successes I had, was being prepared, doing the work, being consistent, and then that transferred into my race. And I raced as a confident athlete because I'd done the research I looked back at the training sessions and all the numbers I was doing, and I'm saying to myself, I can ride up a 10-minute hill at now 320 watts. If anybody else can do better than that, well, they're better than me. I can't do anything about that. But I don't know if there's many people who can do this. I knew my numbers were better than I'd ever done before. This is an example of what my mindset was thinking before the race, and going into the race with calmness of confidence. And that's the thing that we try to push across to our athletes, is going back and doing some homework about your training and being informed about, what numbers can I do, so that comes race day, you can match those numbers and do better. Because on race day, you should be fresher, and you don't want to just match what you've done before. You want to match it and then add some to it. So yeah, I certainly did race with a lot of pressure that was put on myself by myself, but I did it for a reason, because that was going to get the best out of me, and I knew what buttons to push on myself. Because I didn't have a coach that was saying to me, this is what you're supposed to be doing or feeling. Yeah. And so I think I learnt a lot about, what's more important, the actual finishing result. Yes, that mattered a lot to me, and that was super important. But if I'd done everything well and I didn't get that result, I had the mindset before going into the race that I'd be okay with that. If I'd done everything well, if I'd raced to my level and someone was better than me and I'd done all the preparation, I'm absolutely okay with that. And I think if you have that mindset right from the outset, you're going to enjoy your sport so much more, because it's not just about the results. And, the improvement in the PB, they're just as equal. I've said to people, I've won some races where I didn't actually execute very well. I didn't train that well for it, and the competition might not have been that good on the day, even though it was a national title. And then I've won, and I've not been that satisfied, because I knew that I didn't do the best that I could possibly have done. And I've had other races where I've done the best and I've come third or fourth, and I've been quite satisfied because there were people better than me, and that's as good as I could do. So if I can get that message across to people, I think it takes pressure off yourself at the end of the event, knowing that, well, that's all I could do on the day. And either I was good enough on the day, or there was someone better than me, and be okay with that.
That's the reason I asked you the question, is because whether you're vying for a result or a PB or improvement, or potentially a podium, the lessons come down to the same thing. And I actually want to use Jakob's example again, because it even applies from what he said. He said after the race that when he was asked about tactics, he said, with running and these races, generally the strongest runner will win. If you're the strongest runner, you're going to come out on top. And so he has confidence in himself that come the Olympics, he will be the strongest runner. And he said, the strongest runner will win as long as they execute properly and they don't make any mistakes tactically. And what do you mean by that? He said they don't spend any extra energy where they don't need to. And that was a real big standout point to me. And that is what applies to age groupers and performance and mindset is, can you make sure that you execute well and put yourself in a frame of mind where you're not wasting any energy in the wrong parts of the race, and that way you get the most out of yourself. So I think one of the most valuable things we do at Trivelo, and I really like this part of our process, is that our race week and our race day preparation, we're really thorough with this, because I still think that execution and mindset is one of the most underrated and underutilized factor for an age grouper's performance and result at the end. And the result comes from how you execute the process. And yeah, a lot of athletes or a lot of people assume that when you've done the work, like you've talked about, you can turn up on race day and the race will take care of itself. And I think that's definitely not what you're saying, and I think, that could not be more wrong. You still have to execute. You've done all the work to give you confidence, but you still have to execute. And if you don't execute properly, if you put your efforts down at the wrong times, you will not get the reward for all your work. So, you've had... Okay, yep.
No, I can just think of 10 athletes that are in that situation. They are extremely well prepared, and because of tactics or execution, not getting the actual result they want, but they should, because they have the form and the preparation all right. And exactly what you said, it's just not about one thing. It's a combination of getting a lot of things right. And as Ingrid Bridson said, I can be the strongest on the day, but I put the power down as a runner in the wrong part of the race. And I ran 3 wide and ran an extra 8 meters. The fine lines at that level, and you filter that way back down to an age group athlete. You can't afford to do a lot of things wrong in a triathlon. It's going to have such a flow-on effect if you start the ride way above your numbers because everybody else around you is riding hard, or if you start the run 10, 15 seconds faster than your actual ability. You're just going to, that's poor execution, which is going to prevent you, even though you're really prepared and you could not be fitter, but you've just made a mistake on the execution. As a road racing cyclist, there's parts in the race that count where a brake goes up the road and you haven't seen it and you've missed the brake. So now you're in a position where you're possibly the strongest rider in the race, and there's guys up the road who are not as strong as you, but they've executed better than you because they've made a tactical move. And here you are stuck with the decision. What do? Do I have to ride across that gap to join them? You're almost now riding with your hands tied behind your back because of a tactical error, nothing to do with your fitness. And they're just little examples of it. It takes a whole combination of things to get the result that you want. And you need to be super confident about all your preparation. That's the first thing. But then if you don't get up to race day and execute, stay in your lane, and time trialing, I suppose, is easier than a road race because road race has got so many variations and variables that make decision making. You have to really think on your feet quite quickly because the race can be won or lost in your lack of concentration for 5 seconds when you don't react straight away when the right move goes up the road, and that's the end of the race, pretty much. So in a time trial, you've got things to think about, execution around terrain and wind and temperature. You've got to make those decisions. As a marathon runner, you might start the run, and I've always said this as an example. I'm going to talk about at the start of a fun run, even a park run, your running pace might be 4 minutes 30. That's your best 5K running pace. And on that start line, there might be 60 other runners, and there'll be 3 who can run 3:20 pace. There'll be 4 who can run 3:50 pace. There'll be 10 who can run 4:10 pace, and there'll be 60 who can run 5-minute pace or worse. And everybody in the first K runs the same pace. And that's an example of, there's only 2 people in that first K running the right pace, the guys who can run 3:20. They're the only 2 running at their pace. The rest of the 60 runners are all running ahead of their pace. So that's an example of not staying in your lane, getting the execution wrong. Let everybody run off at their own pace. They're making the mistake. You be that 1% who's not going to do that, and you be that 1% of person who's going to run right from the outset your 4:30 pace, and after 100 meters, you're literally 50 meters behind the whole lot of the field. And if you stick to that, stick to your lane, stick to your pace, gradually those people who are running 3:20s and 3:40s, who are 5-minute K pace runners, they'll end up slowing down after a kilometre or 2 kilometres or whatever the distance is. They will eventually be running 5:30s instead of 5 minutes, and you will be running 4:30, and you'll run through the field. And that's an example of execution as a runner, where it's so easy to do that. And I see it almost every park run that I go to, and I watch people all charge off at the same pace. Whereas, you know that yourself, Jordy, you've won most of the park runs you've been in, and you've got 8 people ahead of you. You're going to run 3:13 pace, and you've got guys who are literally going to run 18 minutes for 5K, and you're running 15:50, yet they're ahead of you or beside you. And you'd have to say, oh, you're a good runner now, are you? Or you just got it wrong. You just got your pacing wrong. So they're examples of having perfect fitness, perfect preparation, but just blowing it with the dumbest decision making.
Yeah, it's a message you always say is you'll feel like you're doing the wrong thing, and I just can't tell you how often I have that feeling. And there was a specific race a few months ago, which was an 8K, and there was literally I won the race, and there was literally over 20 people ahead of me for the first 3K, and I really thought, whoa, there's some good competition here, because it wasn't just 1K, it was a full 3 kilometers of where there was 15 to 20 people ahead of me, and then at the 3K mark, you started ticking them off one by one, but that was super surprising, and you do feel like you're doing the wrong thing, and that's a big lesson you're always telling athletes is you said stay in your lane before. You just have to stay in your lane, and if they can hold that for the rest of the race, then you go, whoa, this is a good race, this is some good competition. But you back your own process and what you've gone into the race thinking about. So you've had thousands of.
Just on that, it does mess with your mind, because you think you're making a mistake, but you've just got to bring it back to, if there are 20 runners ahead of me and I'm running the pace I want to, so be it. You shouldn't change anything. You shouldn't try to run faster. It's identifying that there's 20 people ahead of you shouldn't make any difference to what you're doing. You should just stay with what your pace is, and if they're going to run that pace the whole way, then you're going to be 20th instead of winning, and that's where you end up.
So one thing I love is the pre-race chat, and you've had many of them over your coaching career, thousands of pre-race chats, and I want to dive into some of the keys to that conversation and what you're trying to get across. And one of the main questions is, how do you address the anxiety of the race, because it's there with every single athlete. So how do you address the anxiety of the race with an athlete?
Yeah, and I think reminding them, and this is why we do the race plan. We make all our athletes present us with an essay, basically, that's summarising what their race strategy is going to be on the day. And what's the purpose of that? Well, it informs them and informs the coach about what their expectation. We always talk about getting your ambition and your ability aligned, and not getting those things too far apart. So that's the first goal, is to make sure the athlete and the coach are on the same page with what they think the power should be, the average speed on the bike, and what the pace should be as a runner. And of course, the swim is the swim. You're doing your best, and you don't get a lot of feedback unless you're using form goggles where you can see what your pace and your time and stuff is. But generally, you're just swimming to feel. But on the bike, you've got more control, and as a runner, you've got absolute control of what pace you can run at. So we're trying to build a confidence. So making people go back through their history of training is something that will it'll do one or two things. It'll highlight the fact that they've trained poorly and therefore they need to adjust their program plan, their race day plan down, or they've realized that they've trained unbelievably well, but they haven't actually sat down and got perspective of that. And so either way, we're still going to give them confidence about what their race plan is based on their research about their training preparation. So if you've done very little race sessions, race ready sessions, you don't have a lot of history to look at. If you've done, 6 or 8 race ready bike sessions with run off the bikes, you've got a lot of library of wealth of information to give you confidence that the strategy and the pace that you've put down into your race plan is based on true facts, actual training sessions. And that is hugely confidence boosting to the athlete. And they come to the realization, well, I've done that, that many times. I've hit 200 watts, for that 70K or that 60K or that 90K time trial that we did in training. And this is how I felt. And then I was able to run off the bike at 4:30 pace. And these are the reasons why I've got this in my race plan, is because I've done it in training. And you going back and looking at those sessions gives you the confidence that your race plan that you've selected is based on true facts, and you've done it in training. And you're fitter than what you were in those race ready training weeks, because you had a full load of training during the week and then you did a race ready session on the weekend. Now you've got all that fitness in your bank and you've got some tapering. So those numbers should be being able to be matched very comfortably. You still got to concentrate on that, but they're the numbers you've done in training. So your expectation should be that you could do that confidently. So when you're standing on the beach at the start of the race as a triathlete, or as a runner at the start of the marathon or a half marathon or a 10K, whatever it is, you know that your race plan is based on facts about what you've done in training, and you should be hugely confident that if your strategy in that day is accurate, then you should be able to just go out and execute. So that's really the first thing we're wanting the athlete to do, is do some homework. And that's the reason, is to give them a clear understanding of where their form is, whether it's average form, better than average form, or perfect form, or really poor form. We have an understanding of where our form is, and therefore our race strategy should reflect that. And that the outcome of the race will be based on how well you're prepared. And if how well you're prepared is not the way you would have liked it, but you couldn't do anything about it, and you've arrived at race day with this form, you have to have the race plan based around that form, not what you thought you could have done if you had trained well. And I think if you get that wrong, that can be a ruined day. And I think once you lose your ego and say, this is where I'm at based on my training, you'll actually have a good day, and you should be confident. Whether your preparation is poor or not, you should be confident that I can actually do this on the race day.
It's, the answer to the question of how do you get rid of the anxiety is you need to focus on the facts. And when you're focusing on that, and that's why we've talked about the race plan so many times in these podcasts, is when you focus on the numbers, then you are automatically not focusing on the nerves of what could go wrong or the anxiety. You're actually just focused on the execution and what to do. And so I guess once you've got all that down pat and you're focusing on the right things, once you get to the actual day, the race day is a big occasion, and there is a lot that happens. You're up early, you've got the nerves from the night before where you might have lacked a little bit of sleep. The awe of the occasion can be sometimes overwhelming when you turn up. There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of adrenaline, there's lots of noise going on. It's totally different to when you go out training by yourself. So how do you then handle the occasion of the day, and what's your instruction to athletes for the actual day and being in the right mindset when the gun goes off?
Yeah, and we did talk about it a little bit before, which is staying in your lane. And I use that term a lot. Just put yourself into a bubble and almost put a set of headphones on. I don't mean this literally. I mean so that you can't
you can do
hear.
that. I've done that. I definitely do that.
Yeah,
but
in a race, I certainly don't want you. I want you to be
yeah.
aware of what's going on around you.
I thought you meant warm up. Yeah.
Calling up and stuff. I'm talking about actually. I should go back to the warm up. You should just do your routine. And whatever's worked for you before, you should replicate that. And we really want to push our athletes as a marathon runner. You would do certain bit of walking, a little bit of running, a few little stride outs. As a triathlete, you would want to do a little bit of a jog, make sure your bike's all functioning well. in transition, make sure all the gears are working, there's no flat tires, all that sort of stuff, and then do a swim where you're actually in the water, if you're allowed to, and swim for 200 or 300 meters, and then do a couple of 30-second bursts, so that when you go to start your race, you've actually done some warm up. So they're the things that are going to give you a little bit of less anxiety, because you're actually doing something with purpose. So the more bored you are, the more anxiety you're going to create. Standing around, talking to people, is not a good thing to do. So you need to be having a little schedule, about how your preparation is, and try to arrive to the point of where you want to be at the race, at the start line, as early or as late as you want. But don't try to have periods where you're just standing around. You can go off and sit by yourself, or do some extra walking or whatever you like. But and even if you are getting prepared in your tent, and you're getting the stuff on, just be there, be efficient, get some help with putting the wetsuit on if you're doing that, or as a runner, just making sure you've got someone with your bag, and all that sort of stuff's important, but that takes away the anxiety of the actual race. So you want to be thinking about, what you're going to do in the next hour or half an hour, or in some cases 5 hours, depending on what event you're doing. But certainly cutting out the noise is what I'm trying to say. Just, you should go well today, Jordan. That's a really encouraging thing for someone to say, and it's great that people are really, on your side. But straight away, that's given you that word expectation. We don't want that expectation. We just want we want to concentrate on effort and execution. They're the things we want to concentrate on. And when we put expectation as one of those three things, then things change. And you think about the wrong things. So expectation is what you want to do, and that's that ability and ambition. But if you're just talking about effort and execution, and the expectation of the result is not something you should concentrate on. That's actually that's causing you to have the wrong thoughts and let your mind wander onto wrong things, and creates anxiety. And if you've ever had a heart rate meter at the start line, if you're thinking about relaxing and what are my plan in the swim, and how am I going to go about the stroke I'm thinking about, or if you're thinking about, I need to do this time, the heart rate will be different. I guarantee it. Adrenaline with expectation thoughts, adrenaline with a calmness thought, you will have a different heart rate. And I've done it to myself on the start line many times. I'm thinking, God, this race is going to be hard today. And all of a sudden, my heart rate's at 90. And it shouldn't be. It should be sitting, around 60 or 70 at the start of the race. And they're examples of thinking about the wrong thing. And I think, the noise that's around you contributes to that. So just try to be in a bubble. And even when the race starts, when everybody around you, let's just take the fun run again example, everybody around you just takes off, and your immediate response is, I need to go with that. Well, get back in your bubble, check your time, slow right down to where you should be. And that's what I talk about, staying in your lane. That's what I mean, being in the bubble and just letting the external noise, the runners running way ahead of their own pace, let them do all that, and you just stay with where you are. And that takes a lot of patience and a lot of strong mental toughness to not get sucked in. And a lot of times that's why we put you into fun run events, so that when you come to your main race, you're not going to get sucked in again, because you've already, if I asked you after those, I think you did the Sunset Series, there were 3 races, and the very first race, your anxiety levels before race 1 was, you don't know who you're against, you don't know the standard, you don't know if you're going to be 20th, you don't know if you're going to be the winner, and you're just thinking about things that are so different compared to race 2 and race 3, where you've already got an expectation of the runners around you, and you know who is in the race, and you know what your pacing is available to you, and you've just learnt so much from race 1 about your form at the moment, and these are the numbers you can do, and you would have had less anxiety with race 2 and race 3. Would that be true?
For sure. Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. And the more you experience it, the more you make mistakes in the races that don't count, and then you can perform well on the ones that count. Yeah, absolutely true.
And that's the point I want to make. doing these practice events so that when it comes to race day, you have had that experience of, if I do that and run off with these guys, I'm gonna end up blowing the race up. So if you don't have that practice experience from these other races, you will do it on the main race. I guarantee it. You don't have that strong will enough to trust your own race plan and strategy. And that's what I'm talking to people about in their pre-race event is stay in your lane. Don't get sucked in with people around you. You don't know whether they're in great form, and you might know that person and you know that, oh, I normally beat that person, but they're ahead of me. They're making a mistake. Just understand that's probably what is happening. They're the one that's making the mistake, not you. And if you just keep concentrating on other people all the time, it's taking away from what you should be thinking about, which is yourself. And what am I doing in this situation? And that's why I'm saying be in that bubble, almost have blinkers on. And a little example we'd use is when we do one of these Swift time trials where we have a mass start and we've got 70 people on a mass start. And I'm telling a lot of the guys who want to talk to me about, how do I go about this? There's all these people around me. And I'm saying to them, I don't even look at the Zwift screen for the first 5 minutes. I am just looking down. I know the race has started. I'm not looking at anybody on the screen. I'm looking at my number on my bike computer, and I want to ride at 270 watts for that first 3 or 4 minutes. And I don't care what's happening on the screen. And that's an example of just concentrating on the things that matter to you that's going to make you perform well. And then after 4 or 5 minutes, I'll glance up and see who's around me. And then I'll concentrate back on what my bike computer's telling me, and then I'll look up again. Oh, yeah, somebody looks like they're... And all of a sudden, I'm starting to use the competition of the event to challenge me now. And if I get to 15 minutes, I am now racing everybody, and I'm almost not looking at my bike computer at all because the race is going to finish in 5 minutes. So I'm using the competition around me to push myself. So that's a strategy that I use to keep me in my lane. And then once I've got control of the event, then try to be competitive and race people. That's an example of what I'm talking about. I don't want you to stay in your lane the whole time and just, I want you to still race. But there's a point when you do that in a race, as a marathon runner or as a triathlete or as a bike rider, time trialer. You can't do that until you get control of the event, and then you can start racing.
Yeah, look, so much value in everything you just said, and I think the bubble thing is so appropriate, and it's, again, as with all things age grouper, it's a fine line between how much do you want to act like a professional and how much do you know that we're age groupers and we don't need to take it too seriously, because you want to perform your best. You've done all this work in training and you want to be in your bubble as much as possible to give yourself the best chance of succeeding. But the friends and family example is a funny one, because when you get there on race day, one thing that is often forgotten and that you don't expect is, how many people you're going to talk to, because there might be a whole bunch of people from your club. There might be more family and friends around you than you've ever had, because you've been by yourself in all your training sessions. And now there's all these people around and you haven't actually had to deal with that before. And so, they've come to support you. You don't want to be rude and ignore them completely, but you do have to set the expectation of what you need on race day and what's going to help you, and allow for that in that process, and know that there's going to be a period where you want to talk to your family and friends, and then you need to say to them, okay, now I'm warming up, I'm going to get into race mode here. And I'll bring up Ingebrigtsen for a record time in a podcast, but he did some great content while he was injured with his wife, and they did a great little interview just going into kind of the behind the scenes of their life and training and racing. And she made a really interesting point that coming into an actual race, she's feeling the nerves. She feels like just as much as him coming into a championship race. And she said, we stopped going out for the last few weeks. We stopped seeing many people because the risk of getting sick is too great, and so she has to sacrifice herself and stop seeing friends and going out of the house. And she does that for him. And it was a great representation of what your partner can do sometimes to help you achieve your goals. But it really brings up a good point about, if you're really serious about getting the most out of yourself, it's okay to say to people around you and say to your family and friends or on the day, this is what I need to perform at my best today. This is all the work I've been doing. Here's how I want to go about my bubble or my process to really get the most out of myself. And I think that's a really appropriate and good way to handle the awe of the occasion and be in the right mindset to perform at your best. And then you can celebrate at the end when you've executed really well.
Yeah, the transition's always intriguing to me because that's where the crowd is, and you get out of the water and people screaming at you, go 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 on your bike, and that's great. That's exactly what you want to have happen. People supporting you, and then when you come back in off the bike, you've probably been out in the wilderness out there, and all of a sudden you're back in the crowd, and the adrenaline, you can't help it. You're excited because your family's there and they're really cheering you on, and without knowing it, you're just running off the bike just way too fast out of transition. I just see it all the time, and it makes me chuckle. And I'm forever standing about 100 meters after transition, just saying to people, take it easy, relax. And all of a sudden you can see them go, oh yeah, because they've run 100 meters away from their family who are cheering them, and they're still on this adrenaline rush. And that's, it's a funny thing to observe, but you've just got to try. It's so hard to be disciplined. I want you still to have fun and be smiling and enjoying the thing. I don't want you to be serious. That's not what I'm saying. I want you to be serious enough about what your goals are and what your execution is. You can still do it with a smile on your face and enjoy the whole process and wave to your family. And, it's not like you're at the world titles as an elite athlete where the country's relying on you to perform. But, in this situation, you need to be relaxed, and the more relaxed you are and enjoying the process, the more likely the outcome is going to be what you want. And, you just don't want to be too serious. And the more serious you are, the tenser you are. And the more tenser you are, the tighter you are. And you're just not performing with freedom. So if I could say one thing, be confident with what you've done in preparation and stay in your lane, and then enjoy the process of knowing that, whatever preparation I've done for this event, I've managed to work out my race strategy according to that level that I'm at, whether it's 100% or 50%, you're just racing at that level, and enjoy the day and live to fight another day if you know that, you sucked at your preparation, you didn't do what you wanted, you weren't consistent. And, and that's a motivating challenge for you for next time you line up. You're not going to do that again. You don't want to keep repeating that mistake. And for the others who have done exactly what they want, enjoy that process and be happy with that, and smell the roses a bit, and don't move on too quickly. Enjoy what you've achieved. And I think that's the mindset that you should have all the way through. And if we're talking about how you're thinking about you as an athlete, these are the things that are going to help you be in the sport for a long time. If you have an opposite thought process of it's all about results and get angry with the performance, you're not going to last. You're going to give the sport away because it's not enjoyable when you're thinking like that. So you do actually want to be in this sport for a long period of time. I know that because I talk to people all the time, but they get really jack of it because their mindset's actually going about it the wrong way. And if you just change that a little bit, give yourself a little bit more, be kinder to yourself, and understand that, it's not intentional that you didn't train well. Things happened. But, if you better plan and prepare next time, you can change that and still enjoy the sport.
That's great final words, and I think that's why I love the pre-race chat. It just gives you so much confidence and calmness about going into the race, which is what we're aiming for. And I would like to finish off with some words from professional tennis player, or former professional tennis player, Ash Barty, former world number 1, 3-time Grand Slam champion, French Open, Wimbledon Open, and Australian Open, which on home soil is arguably one of the toughest to win as an Aussie because there is so much quote-unquote pressure. And I want to talk about one of her quotes in her press conferences leading into the Australian Open final, where she got asked, how are you handling all the pressure from the country, the weight of the country on your shoulders? And she just sat there and said to the reporter, what pressure? And the reporter's going, you're joking, right? Like, you're an Aussie going to the grand final, there is undoubtedly pressure. And she's going, no, there's not. You can think of the pressure. I don't feel any pressure. I'm just going to go out there and play my best tennis. And if I win, I win. If I don't, I don't. And they're almost laughing at her going, that's ridiculous. You want to win the Australian Open. And she's just going, it's not ridiculous. I'm just going to play my best tennis. And that's all that matters for me. And I just think that is absolutely brilliant. That's the exact example of what you're talking about with staying in your lane. So I think if she can do it as a world number 1 with the quote unquote pressure on her shoulders, I think we can all take a lesson from that. So it's been a monster episode. Thanks as always for listening. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.